Your money keeps you poor. Just imagine trying to use a wheel that is not round, a drum that isn't hollow, a bow without elasticity. They wouldn't work. It is not possible to use something that lacks the essential feature. A wheel has to be round. A drum has to be hollow. A bow must have elasticity. Now, in a similar way, real money should preserve your wealth. But the money you use doesn't have this characteristic. Your money keeps you poor. Money Arata. You know how it is not easy to save money and get wealthy even though you're working so hard? Well, there is actually a reason for that. It is not your fault. It is because the money you're using is fundamentally flawed. It lacks a crucial property called hardness. I'm going to be showing you why this matters and how understanding hardness can set you on a path to financial freedom. See, the brain is wired to spend money as soon as you get it, because deep down, it knows that the money you have isn't doing its job. It's just like having a wheel that isn't round, a drum that isn't hollow, or a bow without elasticity. None of these things would work properly, and neither does your money. Now, the worst part is that there are people out there who benefit from keeping you in the dark about this, either because they also don't understand the concept of hardness themselves, or they're purposely conspiring to keep you poor. But don't worry, we're going to be changing that. Here in this episode of the Money Arata series, we will discover how to find money with hardness. Hard money. This is how you can finally see why you've been struggling all this time, and once you grasp this, you will be armed with the knowledge that you need to break free from the financial traps that have been holding you back. Now, please attention, this is not financial advice. Read the full disclaimer before proceeding. It is incorrect to say that money is purely a social construct. I know that there is an academic belief that money is simply a matter of trust, a collective hallucination. And this couldn't be further from the truth. Many people think that money can be anything, as long as we all agree on its value. If we all agree that salt can be used as money, then it will work. Or if we agree that the new money will be seashells, it's okay. Or copper coins, or pieces of paper with drawings of people who are no longer alive, or maybe even a digital information from a centralized database from the government. On a superficial level, it kind of looks right, because indeed humankind has agreed to use all these different objects and even abstract information as money, but all of these have failed to be real money. See, money needs specific features to function effectively, and today we're going to be talking about one crucial aspect, which is hardness. Hardness means that money should be difficult to produce more units of, which helps to preserve its value and make it a sustainable, adequate tool for building wealth. Just think about it. Imagine a wheel that isn't perfectly round, or maybe it is round, but it's made of fresh clay. It looks like it will work, but once it starts rolling, it will quickly lose its shape, and therefore it will fail to perform its function. In the book *Sapiens*, historian Yuval Noah Harari popularized the idea that money is a mental construct. He argued that as long as we trust and we all agree that something has value, it can serve as money, and that is incorrect. While trust and agreement are crucial, they are not enough. Money also needs to have certain properties to fulfill its role effectively, and hardness is one of them. Hardness is different from rarity. Hardness is in essence the difficulty to produce more units of. The idea of hard money comes originally from the comparison between a metallic coin, which is hard, compared to a soft piece of paper note, paper bill. But it isn't the physical hardness that actually matters. It is the fact that since it is so easy to produce, to create more pieces of paper money, that means it is a worse type of money. Now you might be thinking that hardness is about rarity, because these precious metals are rare. But there is a nuance. It is not the rarity that matters. It is the difficulty to increase the supply. I will use a very silly example just to illustrate and help you to remember this. I like ludicrous examples because they serve as memory hooks. So let's talk about the feces of white rhinos. See, white rhinos are very rare because they are animals under extinction. So their feces can also be considered rare. But we can't use the feces of white rhinoceros as money. Once a sufficient number of people start to agree that it is money, there will be a rush, an incentive to protect these white rhinos, to create more white rhinos to collect their feces, or just find a way to overfeed the existing rhinos. Okay, you get it. Enough of this analogy. The point is that hardness is not about rarity. It is about how difficult it is to produce more of something. Hardness is linked to the concept of stock to flow. We've already discussed the concept of stock to flow in another video, which was episode number 9, which is closely related to hardness. When money has a high stock to flow ratio, it means it's more likely to maintain its value and be a reliable store of wealth. It is essential to understand that money without hardness can lead to severe consequences. For example, we can see the African tribes that once used glass beads and cloth pieces called panos as currency. When they were isolated without Europeans, these items worked as money because they couldn't easily increase the supply. But when Europeans realized that they could mass produce these items, they flooded the African markets with them, essentially enslaving those tribes. This tragic outcome illustrates the dangers of money that lacks hardness. Money is a discovery, not an invention. Let's repeat this idea. Money is a discovery. It is not an invention. It might look like just a game of words, a subtle distinction, but it is essential to grasp if we want to really understand money and its role in our lives. An invention is something unique that we create. It is something that could have been made in a different way, different ways to achieve the same goal. A discovery, on the other hand, is something that exists independently of human creativity. It's always been there. It's just waiting for us to discover, to uncover it. Just consider the wheel, the drum, or the bow and arrow. These are all discoveries rather than inventions because they're based on fundamental principles that different societies stumbled upon independently. The wheel, for example, needs to be round. It needs to maintain its shape to roll effectively. Now, of course, people can invent special wheels with special materials for different purposes, but the concept of a wheel is always the same. It must be round. And in a similar way, the drum needs to be hollow to produce sound. The bow and arrow require a balance of elasticity and sturdiness to shoot accurately. And just like these fundamental principles, the concept of money has been discovered by various societies throughout history. It is not something that has been invented by one particular individual and then everybody else copied that idea from that first inventor. Instead of that, different civilizations across the world recognized that certain objects could serve as a medium of exchange, store of value, and unit of account as long as they met some specific criteria. And hardness is one of these aspects that we just discussed. When societies discovered money, they tapped into an essential aspect of human life that transcends culture, transcends language and geography. Money, just like the wheel, the drum, the bow and arrow, it fulfills a universal need. It is built upon a foundation of principles that cannot be altered or ignored. There is a reason why we're doing all this explanation here. We need to understand all of this to be able to understand why certain forms of currency with weak hardness have failed consistently throughout history and what we can learn from these experiences. This is how we finally understand what is the right type of money to accumulate and what is the type of money that we have to spend. Your money is not real money. It is not hard money. So now that we agree that money is a discovery and it has been emerging in different ways, in different societies, we can go deeper into the concept of hardness. Hardness is a crucial property that money needs to have for it to function properly. You can also watch a basic video on sound money in the episode number 2 of our money Arata series. Hardness, in the context of money, refers to the difficulty of producing more units of that currency. This property is essential because it creates a scarcity, which in turn preserves the value of money. When a currency lacks hardness, it becomes susceptible to inflation, eventually leading to the whole collapse of that monetary system. And this is why we explain that money is not a purely mental construct. It can be very dangerous to believe in this idea that the mere agreement of the people is enough for something, anything, to function as money. Just like we cannot mentally agree together that a solid block of stone can be used as a drum, we cannot accept that today's fiat money, which is controlled, the supply is controlled by the central banks, is a functional form of money. The money created by the central banks can be diluted at any time and therefore it is not real money. Although it is legally required to be accepted as money because of the legal tender laws, fiat money, the money created by the central banks, it fails to retain wealth and purchasing power over time because of dilution. This situation is so similar to how the African tribes were exploited and turned into slaves when the Europeans increased the supply of glass beads and the cloths, the panos. Initially, these items were scarce. They were difficult for these tribes, isolated, to produce. That made them valuable as money for a short period of time, but they lacked hardness. When the Europeans arrived in Africa, they quickly realized they could easily mass-produce more glass beads, more panos using the European advanced technology, and this led to a massive influx of this money without hardness, which undermined their scarcity, their value. Consequently, the African tribes' monetary system collapsed. The people were left vulnerable to the exploitation by the European traders. Just try to imagine this. Imagine a family in Africa trying to preserve their wealth using glass beads, only to have their purchasing power wiped out by the arrival of Europeans because suddenly the beads they were collecting their whole lives were worth less and less because now there are so much more beads around. The nominal value, the total number of beads they had, was the same. But proportionally, the proportional value of those beads was diluted with the dumping of more beads. These examples illustrate the critical role of hardness in the functionality of money. When money lacks this essential property, it becomes prone to losing its value, which can have disastrous consequences for individuals and for the society. This is why your money keeps you poor. It is like a bucket with holes. By recognizing the importance of hardness in money, we can better understand the true essence of money. We can make better decisions about the monetary systems that we use, that we support. We need a monetary system that can reliably, sustainably store wealth and allow us to build wealth, rather than leave us vulnerable to exploitation. The properties of money are known for a long time. Ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle gave us the timeless criteria of what constitutes good money. His insights not only emphasize the importance of hardness, but also help us to understand how different societies have consistently discovered the same essential properties of money throughout history. Aristotle proposed 4 main criteria for good money: durability, portability, divisibility, and intrinsic value. Durability refers to money's ability to withstand wear and tear, ensuring that it can be used over time. Portability means that money should be easily transportable, allowing people to be exchanging goods and services conveniently. Divisibility implies that the money should be divisible into smaller units without using its value, facilitating the transactions with different sizes. And finally, the intrinsic value signifies that money should have some inherent value, which here is the moment where the concept of hardness comes in. The criteria set forth by Aristotle highlights the importance of hardness as an essential property of money. Hardness contributes to the intrinsic value of a currency, ensuring that it remains scarce and it maintains its purchasing power over time. This is crucial for a sustainable monetary system, just like we saw in the African tribes example, their use of glass bead and panos. That money didn't have hardness. It could work for a short period of time, but eventually there will be dilution, there will be inflation, there will be loss of purchasing power. Money has to be immune to greed. It has to be impossible to be diluted. Otherwise, it doesn't serve as real money. Now, what is fascinating is that different societies throughout history have independently discovered these properties of good money. You can see, for example, ancient civilizations like the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, Chinese, they all developed their own forms of money, exhibiting the same criteria of Aristotle, including hardness. They were trying to find commodities like silver and gold and even seashells as currency that was recognizing the inherent value, the scarcity. Now, here is when we say that money is a discovery, it is not an invention. This is very evident when we see how these different cultures, without communicating one to each other, they all consistently stumbled upon the same essential properties of money. It's just like the wheel, the drum, the bow and arrow. Money is a universal human discovery. It has been emerging time and time again by different societies, trying to function as a store of value. Bitcoin has the necessary features of good money. Now we explored the essential properties of good money, we can now bring our discussion to the modern era by examining two contrasting examples: Bitcoin and fiat currency. By comparing these two forms of currency, we can better understand the importance of hardness and other necessary properties in the context of today's financial landscape. First, let's take a look at Bitcoin. As a decentralized digital currency, Bitcoin has been designed to fulfill the properties of good money, including durability, portability, divisibility, and intrinsic value. One of the key features of Bitcoin is its limited supply, which is capped at less than 21 million Bitcoin. This scarcity contributes to the hardness. It ensures that the currency remains valuable and cannot be easily diluted. In many ways, Bitcoin has the Aristotelian criteria for good money in a digital format. Now, on the other hand, we have fiat money, the money that is issued by the government, that is controlled by governments and their central banks. Unlike Bitcoin, fiat currencies like the US dollar, the peso, the euro, the Brazilian real, the yuan, they don't have a fixed maximum supply. It allows to be susceptible to inflation and devaluation. According to Milton Friedman, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Fiat money relies heavily on trust in government institutions and the legal tender laws to maintain its value, rather than the true inherent properties that would make it good money. The lack of hardness and the reliance on trust make these fiat currencies extremely fragile inherently. The consequences of relying on money without the essential properties of good money can be the constant theft of the people who are using it. This is what we explained already in the episode number 3 of the Money Arata series. That's what we saw with the African tribes and their use of glass beads and panos. Lack of hardness will inevitably lead to the collapse of the monetary system and has disastrous effects on individuals and societies. In the case of fiat money, continuous devaluation erodes our wealth, forces us to spend rather than save. It instinctively recognizes that our purchasing power will inevitably decline over time. We are being encouraged to spend, and this keeps us poor. Now you understand the importance of hardness in money. We began by debunking the myth that money is merely a mental construct, and we also explored how, just like the wheel, the drum, the bow and arrow, money is a necessary discovery. It is not an invention. Money needs to have inherent properties of hardness, otherwise it is not money, it doesn't perform its function. This all leads us to the concept of hardness. Hardness is an essential property of good money. It ensures its functionality, its sustainability. And throughout history, different societies have independently discovered the importance of hardness in their monetary systems. We discussed also the Aristotelian criteria for good money, which emphasizes the necessity of hardness and other properties. And by comparing modern examples like Bitcoin and fiat money, we've seen here very clearly how these properties play a crucial role in the strength, the stability of currencies. It is essential to recognize that the money that we use today, this fiat currency, does not have the hardness that is required to maintain its value over time. This flaw in our monetary system is the reason why we instinctively feel the urge to spend rather than save. It is not a good idea to save money. Money that can be diluted does not serve as real money, no matter how many people agree on a collective hallucination that the government can create money out of thin air. Now you have a better understanding of money. You can consider the properties that make good money and how they impact our society, our economy. With the knowledge of the essential properties of good money, we can work together towards a more stable and prosperous future for ourselves and generations to come. And you can start right now visiting arata.se/diamond hands.